The purpose of this talk, I got to be careful, look at the right place, is to talk about my experiences teaching both live and online in hybrid courses. I have several slides here. I'll go through them, but I'll obviously try to leave plenty of time for discussion or questions. Just to kind of give you a sense of my background, I've been doing this for a very long time. As far as my university courses, I currently teach 2 hybrid courses where I have a simultaneous live group and an online group. One of them has about 120 students, the other one has about 60. So one of them has 30 and 30. The other one has maybe 90 residential and 30 online. So these are classes that I'm teaching in one of the College of Engineering's remote classrooms where I would have some support help as well. In addition to that, I also teach a lot of non-credit courses to industry folks. And I do roughly 400 to 500 students per year. Most of those students are in the online world. So most of them are going to be online. In terms of my delivery styles, or just a summary of that, I've had almost 18,000 students now in my teaching career through remote live, asynchronous online, classroom, and blended. What I want to do today is talk about this idea of how do we deliver our online courses at the same level as a classroom. I'll give you some of my personal research. Please feel free to chime in if you have questions as we go along. Then I'll talk about some success factors that I've learned over the years that I think are key, and then just some additional resources available. First of all, when teaching a dual hybrid in-person online course, right, the goal is to try to have no difference in student learning and really no difference in the overall experience. How can we measure no difference in student learning? Well, it's not really an easy thing to do, but one way is to try to look at just grades and performance. And this is not a perfect measure, but it gives us, some indication. And then in terms of the overall experience, we can use course evaluations. I've been fortunate because I teach hybrid courses, I get course evaluations from on campus, and I get course evaluations from the distance learning students. So the question is, can we achieve this parity? Can we achieve no difference in both? And if yes, what are some of those key factors? So I'm going to provide some of my, personal research that I've been doing over the years. Again, for hybrid courses, I've pulled the data set from fall 13 through fall 19. This is 11 hybrid courses. And if I look at course evaluation ratings, right, and I look at the average difference, I have been able to get no significant difference between residential and distance learners. Now, overall, my classes are pretty well received. My Q1, Q2 average is typically 4.7s, sometimes as low as 4.5, and sometimes as high as 4.9. But usually, 4.7 plus or minus 1 is a pretty good indication. So they're scored, pretty well in general. But in terms of the comparison and evaluations, I tend not to see much of a difference between them. Now, on the issue of scoring, this is something I've also been tracking for years. And this is something that has been harder for me. At one point, I used to see about a 2% difference in the final average scores from group to group, where the residential typically would score higher. In the last couple of years, though, I have been able to get this down to be no significant difference as well. So I have been able to get parity in my courses between distance learning online students that are online asynchronous, I should say, and residential students. So I've been pretty pleased with that. I have looked at this for some others, and this is just the same time period, but This is 34 other classes in the College of Engineering. And in the other classes, as a general rule in the College of Engineering, is that we do see, in terms of course evaluations, for example, a difference. We tend to see residential students rating the courses higher than the online distance learning. So take what you want from that. I would say that there are probably some things that I'm doing that others may not be doing that are probably helping to close this gap. And this presentation is really a list of things that I do. Now, as I go through my list, there are other things that I haven't included, and there's lots of other strategies. I'm not going to suggest in any sense that they're the only ways to do that, but I'm here to share my experiences, and I welcome input from others. I have tried lots of things over the years, so also please feel free to ask me any questions related to that. So first of all, we think about how do I achieve parity or things of the same performance level. When I think about teaching, I always think about, there's really 4 areas that I think affect our teaching, to summarize anyways. There is your organization, there is the content that you're providing, there is the way in which you are delivering things, and then there are assessments, things that are aligned to content or making sure that your assessments are fair and those type of issues. And in my experience, you have to make adjustments or enhancements in all these areas. If you want to offer a hybrid course at the same level, this is just not the same as teaching just a straight classroom. And you know, one of the obvious things is when it's a straight classroom, right? When people have maybe simple questions, they just kind of reach over and ask you. And so it's a lot more, I should say, it's a lot easier to stay organized, to resolve issues. Once you move into this dual hybrid, the communication becomes a lot more difficult, and you have to really think about that. What I want to do is just go through what I think are some of the key successes in each of these 4 areas. First of all, I think the number one thing is certainly organization. If there's one thing that is the most important when it comes to trying to offer a hybrid course, is the organization. You have different people taking the class in different modalities. You have to be quite clear on how things are structured and how things will roll out throughout. So I have a couple of must-haves and a couple of recommendations. First of all, a must-have. You must have a very good syllabus. You must state all the requirements, the due dates, the policies. And people say, well, that's how it is in every class. And I would say, yeah, that's true. But certainly with the online world, people are really planning around their schedules. And so it's very important to them that you stick to the schedule. And also recognizing that you have students typically in different time zones, and this is going to create some additional challenges. For instance, I always have office hours in both the morning and an afternoon, or I have my GSI split these up because I recognize that I need to try to accommodate as many time zones as possible. But certainly having a really good syllabus makes a big difference, particularly with policies. People can't come to you and kind of ask about things. They need to be well stated. Number 2 is, I think it's a must that you use a good central learning management system, such as Canvas. I've used many learning management systems over the years. I'm one of the sort of original pioneers of this, so I've tried most of them. Canvas is better than many. There's other ones that are also, I would say, equally as good. But Canvas has a lot of nice features. It's missing some things, but it has a lot of good features. And this is the university's solution, and I'm a big proponent of sticking with this. So all of our students have a similar look. And Canvas is the single point access. I know some people like to mix Canvas and other things. I just use Canvas for everything. And this has served me quite well over the years in terms of keeping people organized and good communication. A couple of strong recommendations is I'm a huge believer in this idea of a workflow tool. that you have this master schedule that is on the home page. So when I log into my class, I go right to a home page with the master schedule, and everything is organized by lecture numbers and topic names and topic IDs. And one thing I've done over the years is I have designed my class that I do not deviate. Every lecture I cover a certain amount of material. If I finish 5 minutes early, I finish 5 minutes early. I set it up so that I finish it on time so that you can start on day one of the class. And when I say lecture 12 is going to cover this topic, my classes always cover that topic on lecture 12. This is really helpful for student organization, but it takes some discipline to stick to your class notes and your plan. And if there are needs for deviations, then sometimes I would have like a second tape that I might offer as background or additional, but I stick to the schedule. I'm also a big believer that every session should be well grouped. So if I have lecture 1, I go to the page of Canvas that has lecture 1, that has the files needed for the lecture, assignments, discussion links, etc. Now, inside of Canvas, there are a couple of different strategies. One is to use Canvas pages. Another is to use Canvas modules to help you organize the content. I won't go into a lot of detail here. Canvas modules is nicer in the sense that you can control the release of things easier. But personally, I find it visually or aesthetically unpleasing. So I don't use it at all. I don't like the way it looks. And so I build a web page inside of Canvas for each one of my lectures. And, I build one and just duplicate and edit. So I don't think it's all that big of a deal. But this allows me to make, in my mind, things look a lot more, easier to understand and more crisp. Any questions so far?
Can you give an example of the workflow that you mentioned on Canvas?
Sure. So my next 2 slides, let me give you just some screen snapshots from my Canvas page. So in my Canvas homepage, so I would write a page and then I would set it to homepage in Canvas. And on my homepage, I would have instructor information, link to syllabus, virtual office hours. I always give people a link to Kane. That's our engineering, the computer software, how they log in to get to computer software. But then if you notice in this slide, there's a table, session 1, 2, 3. Each session has a date and it has a topic. And these are all clickable links. So if I clicked on any one of them, it would take me to a page. And this would be a sample of a page. On my sample page, I would describe the topic or learning objectives. I would give people a direct access to the PDF files so they could take notes on their own. If there's any data, I give them copies of it in Excel. If there's an assignment, there's a direct link to the assignment or discussion question. There is a link to navigate. And then if there is any type of, if there's a video, which there will be in all of these, then there'll be a link to the video directly on that. So now each page has everything you need to know for that topic, and they're replicated. So you can go from page to page, and you get a similar look as you go through that. And so the way the workflow works, if I scroll back a slide, is, you start in lecture 1, you go through material, and then you go to lecture 2. Now, if you use the modules, you can sort of prevent people from jumping ahead, or you can do what I do sometimes is I just, schedule the availability of information, as I want it to be released. So I create the structure up front, but I might only publish the pages once a week so that people can't move too far ahead. It sort of depends on the class and my strategy. But this would be a kind of example. Now, I have a whole tutorial on how to set up a Canvas course, and I have a Canvas export package. So if you wanted to look at my Canvas export package, I have sample courses if you ever wanted to see a sample course on how I set things up. If you copied Nexus or contacted Nexus Design, there's an email at the end of this presentation, or you write me or go to the Nexus webpage. There is more detail on each of these. Other questions?
Are these templates available through Canvas Commons?
No, they're just available through Nexus faculty resources.
Thank you.
I'm not sure this is an answerable question, but for those of us who are new to teaching in a hybrid form, do you have advice for how we would balance your advice to stick with a schedule and the kind of flexibility we may need as we, feel our way through which assignments or formats work best for our instructional situation?
Yeah, I will answer that because I was there once myself. And so I had to do this at the beginning. And I will say that, at the beginning, sometimes, I had things that I was kind of releasing them kind of 1 week at a time. And I was kind of like teaching myself as I went. I tried to create an overall structure, but I think probably the first time I taught this, I certainly made a couple of changes on the fly as you go. And so, over time, I've gotten pretty good at designing classes that I don't need to do that anymore. My advice usually is it's going to take longer than you think. So when you're used to teaching in a live classroom and then you go to this, hybrid format, things just take a little bit longer. So I've learned over time to have, a little bit shorter, planned presentations and then try to expand as necessary. But sometimes at the very beginning of this, I actually would end lecture, maybe 5 or 10 minutes early sometimes because I didn't set it up as I would have wanted to. And then over time, I've kind of narrowed that down. I do feel though that being 5 minutes or 10 minutes early is better than starting the next topic and then not finishing it. So I do try to chunk everything in sort of a modular approach. And then I would also say that when I have been way off on something, then what I will do is I will just say, okay, I need to cover this extra topic, and I'll just chunk out maybe 10 to 30 minutes of separate, and I'll just add that as a part B and tell everyone, whether you're in class or not in class, that, hey, you need to watch lecture part B to pick that up. But certainly, I appreciate your comment, and I don't want to create the impression that it's easy to lay everything out. But I would say that it took me probably, in most classes, in the original time, probably would take me 2 or 3 years before I could really, feel like I'm going to teach exactly what I'm going to teach throughout. And of course, I'm going to be somewhat flexible. But then, it's not something you're going to do right off the bat. So did that help, or you want to follow up, or?
That was actually really helpful. Thanks.
Okay. So I want to move along. The second big area that affects teaching effectiveness, obviously, is your delivery recommendations and your increasing engagement. Certainly engaging styles are always welcome, and the more engaging you are with your lectures, the better. I'm in kind of even right now, I had to switch computers at the start of this, or I'd be writing on slides left and right. So I apologize that I'm not writing on slides, but I had to switch computers there. I had some problem with the audio, but which I'll tie to later as my backup plan. I always have a backup. Top recommendation for this delivery is to remember to always keep it digital. And what I mean by that is I've stopped completely ever writing on a whiteboard, even though I could, and I could have a camera on it. Whiteboards are hard to read. They have really poor capture quality, and most of the time people don't follow them very well. I'm a huge believer that, I use PowerPoint or similar. I put it in pen mode. I have a stylus. In terms of equipment, I only teach if I have a Wacom stylus available to me. So I have a personal Surface Pro, which lets me do that. I teach in classrooms where there are Wacoms pre-set up. And so I'm just a big believer that you've got to use PowerPoint and you've got to write on slides when you have people not in the classroom and you want to keep them engaged. It makes a big difference. Other things, if you are in a classroom and you have both live and online students, you have to remember that there's no such thing as pointing to a screen. The online can't see that. You have to learn to point everything with a, oops, sorry about that. You'll have to point with everything with a pen or a laser pointer, as I'm doing now. Again, I'm a big believer in using a tablet PC, or I like the Wacoms a lot in terms of being able to draw and write on slides. Just as an example of that, here's an example of me teaching in a classroom. So I'm in a classroom, but I want to have you note that there is a picture of my slides. There's a picture of me talking. I like the format where students can see both the instructor talking and the slides in the same shot. And then what I like to do is, as you can see here, I've given a PowerPoint slide with kind of like a template look, and then I fill in the blanks. So the red marks in that slide was me actually drawing on the slides during class. I think this is much more engaging than just flipping through PowerPoints. I also like the fact that I use a system that has a nice search capability, so people can search on content, transcripts. I always provide things with ASR, which stands for automatic speech recognition. I think this is, a great thing, even though it's probably, in my experience, it comes in automated at about 90% accurate. So, 10% of the words are mumbled, or as an instructor, I'm just not being very clear with my pronunciations. But it's about 90%, and it's really helpful for people to navigate around that. So I'm a big believer in using automatic speech recognition tools with searching contents and transcripts. Finally, I know that, some people are doing this from home, and, it is what it is. I'm not a big fan of that myself. I don't think that the home production quality comes out as well. If you have to, then you have to. I certainly understand that. But all of my classes that I've always taught, I've always done this using university resources on campus, and high def video audio quality delivery has been the sort of the norm there for me of late as technology has advanced. Other questions before I move on?
Is Panopto available through specific schools or departments rather than university-wide? Yeah,
so Panopto is available for some departments, but not all. Every department can use Kaltura. Kaltura is similar. Personally, I like Panopto better, but other people like Kaltura. But Kaltura is available for everybody. Certain departments have the availability of Panopto. We've done some benchmarking. They come out similar, but there are some features in Panopto and just kind of the look and feel of it. I just like it better myself, and so that's what my department is using, so I'm fortunate there. But there are university contracts with Panopto if departments want to investigate that. Don't buy it from scratch. You'd want to, lump on with somebody else. But it does cost a little bit more to display in Panopto than the Kaltura system. Anybody else? Okay, some other things I would call some best practices. When you are teaching in a hybrid mode where you are both classroom and off classroom, I try to limit my physical movement. This was hard for me at first because I like to walk around a classroom. And if I'm in a classroom with no cameras, I'm walking all over the place. But once I am in a dual hybrid mode, I automatically change my thinking and I limit my physical movement so that I always stay in camera view. That's taken some practice over the years, but now I've done that. Seems to work out better. Obviously, microphones are huge, right? Using the internal is not as good. We want to use a higher sound quality. You got to be adaptive for some of your in-class exercises. I use sometimes like Google Sheets and those things, which are more collaborative documents. Other tips, when people are asking a question, you should repeat all those questions from the live audience for the online learners. You have to summarize main points. So if a student does answer a question in class, I'll usually summarize that so the people online, hear the answers, the two-way exchange. I'm a big believer that you got to require some note-taking to keep people engaged. And I also, as I mentioned, Panopto, Kaltura, other ones that are, more premium video players, I think they make a difference for the students. Just a couple other things on engagement. You really need to use virtual office hours. It helps with video, with Zoom or Blue Jeans. I always load Zoom or Blue Jeans directly into my class so that I can have office hours just as part of the Canvas. Other things that are useful, especially the online students, they get really nervous when you don't contact them back. They're stuck, there's no one to talk to. They don't have the same network of students, so I try to respond within 24 hours, even to acknowledge no more than 72. Does that mean I've never missed an email? Nope, I've missed emails. I apologize for that, but I'm actually pretty good about responding. I also use Piazza, so I can try to respond within 24 hours of that. Number 3 down there is another good one, is if you're gonna use Canvas, spend some time telling your class how it's organized. Give them a little tour in class, usually helps people. I do like virtual teams. If I have different time zones, I typically will group by time zone. I really like discussion boards. This is how online learners can have a channel to participate. So one of my classes in particular, I have weekly discussion questions that, you don't answer every one, but there are some requirements to participate with that. And I found this is really a good way to integrate the live and the online benefits. And then, I try to keep weekly announcements to keep people informed of the class. Questions for me?
For Piazza versus just kind of general Canvas discussions, what are the different ways that you use those?
So usually the question is, what's the difference, or how would I use discussion versus Piazza? And I use discussions when I sort of have like if I was giving a lecture and I'd say, I want you to reflect upon the relationship between, two concepts. This I would use through a discussion board. I would use Piazza for more things like, on homework 5, I don't understand what you meant with this assumption, or I don't understand, where to find this information, or even something like, when's the test? I would answer all that sort of like what I would consider the daily organizational type things using Piazza. And then I would use the discussions for more, I would say more sort of organized or structured learning. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. On the issue of content, right? Obviously, the more relevant, valued, stimulating, this is all important. Doesn't matter if they're live or online. But when you are designing content with the online learners, you have to consider them. And some things that I think are good to always remember is that online learners learn mostly on their own. They don't have the same network of other students. So this idea that, maybe today you may not even realize it, but maybe a lot of your students are kind of learning from each other. And this is something that you might learn the first time you teach online, is this is a lot is happening when you notice certain types of questions. So over time, I've kind of learned to, as I develop things, I think, I got to make the assumption that this person is totally on their own, and that I have to provide, frameworks and clues to help them get through the material in an efficient way. I recognize there's less access for instructors and GSI for minor clarifications. I anticipate that sometimes by, sending more announcements with things that I think are likely to be asked. And then it's harder to concentrate or focus. And for that reason, again, I would try to do more, ink on slides or more interactivity type of things. Just some general comments, really giving a good lecture framework with re-entry points. I'm pretty good about saying, here's my lecture, here's section 1, section 2, section 3, chunking my lectures out. And so students kind of get lost. They can come back in if they need to. It's easy to search that way. So I'm pretty good about having a really clear structure. I give a motivational lecture. I talk about what the different topics are. I organize my notes by topic. And even if I write on the digital whiteboard or write in the slides, I leave blank slides within my lecture so people know when these are going to happen. So I'm pretty good about this whole framework with re-entry points. I do try to chunk content. Now you can chunk your content, I would say, into like 20 to 30 minute segments. Now, if I'm teaching an hour and 20 minutes, I'm just going to roll through all of those and I'm let the students, stop and start the tape on their own. So people in a live classroom, they're probably sitting there for whatever the lecture period is, but every 20 to 30 minutes, I'm pivoting usually to sort of a new topic area or sort of breaking that up. And, it just gives time for reflection exercise in the online world. It gives people kind of a pause point. So I always try to organize my things around, here's, 20 or 30 minutes, and then here's kind of like the next topic. I'm big on having online practice exercise. This is one of the big things that I felt closed the performance gap. What I do now is I just go to Canvas, there's graded exercise and there's practice exercises. And I've just posted practice exercises. People can do them, they can not do them. I give solutions to them. People kind of work as they want to, but the people that really, need that additional work, this really helps with the performance closing. And then finally, I'm not a big person on walking through software during class, but I'm a big proponent on having supplemental software tutorials. If I am using software, during class, I probably just do screen snapshots because some people like to kind of, work their way through that. But then outside of class, I always have, 10 to 30 minute tutorials to show people. This is a huge frustration relief. When you have people who are in different time zones and they're watching lecture and then they have to go apply some software, it's really frustrating for them to just try to pick it up on their own. They really benefit from having these supplemental. Whereas some people, they don't need that, and so they don't really feel like they're wasting class time for that. So it's kind of like you choose the appropriate learning style that matches your best methods. Any questions? All right, I will move on. The fourth area is the assessments. And again, the online challenges are really just, there's no one to really ask for simple clarifications, and they have more technical connectivity issues for that. So things over the years, clearly writing clear instructions. This is just key. Posting the assignments to simplify communication via Canvas. So people know where they're always at, they know their due dates, all that stuff is very nicely available through Canvas. If I want to have them upload stuff, I like to use the Canvas file upload tool. This helps me keep track of submissions, helps me with online grading. Now, I know there are some different grading tools. That's fine. I've been pretty happy using the built-in Canvas quizzes functionality. I usually write things. I use open-ended questions that have to be manually graded online. I upload project reports. I do all kinds of assessments like most people. But I try to organize everything through Canvas. Due dates, people in different time zones, people online, they have more challenges with their scheduling sometimes. So I'm usually pretty good about posting things at least a week in advance. I also have recognized over the years that because of technical connectivity, for example, to university software, you have to give people enough time to have a chance to do that. And then the other thing that is really huge in the online world, it's in all worlds, but when I look at student evaluations, the one that really hurts faculty teaching distance learning students is not returning graded assignments in a timely manner. When you're online and you don't really have anyone else to really feel comfortable talking with, really getting that feedback is really critical. And if you wait too long, whereas you're on campus, maybe some students will kind of like, well, I got the same as all my colleagues, so, you know, other students, I'm okay. But when people are kind of on their own and they're getting no feedback, they get really nervous, they get really stressed out. It's really important to give them, you know, the timely feedback for that. You know, usually students, you know, some things I return in a couple days, but usually within 1 week, pretty good about that. All right, just a couple other observations and I'll wrap up here. Number one, I've had the case where I have a class that has, needs to be taught in a special classroom for video support. And because of that, there's only so many seats. There's just only so many seats in the class. And I have more demand than seats. And so after a while, I started saying, okay, well, I'm already taping everything and I already have this hybrid mode. So if you're an on-campus student and you want to take 2 classes at the same time, or you want to work and then take my class asynchronously, I started letting students do that. I started letting students do this, I would say about maybe 10 years ago, where I have more students than seats. In fact, I get to a point where I would tell them if everyone showed up, there wouldn't be enough seats. And so I'd say, you know what, it's perfectly fine with me if you want to choose asynchronous online, even if you're on campus. And when I first started doing this, I would say that maybe 10% of the students would choose the asynchronous online. Now, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but over time, I would say about 50% are now choosing the asynchronous online. And, you know, it's a large kind of lecture hall, 90 students. And when you have 90 students in a class, you know, the reality is you don't get everybody involved. Now, if you have 30 people in a class, I would require participation and I would be expecting that. But when I'm teaching 90 students or more, this is more of a lecture hall. And I kind of over time have appreciated that some people don't talk in class and they would choose asynchronous. And I found that a lot now do that. And I asked them, I said, you know, why did you do that? You know, you don't like me or something like that or whatever. And they would say, no, I like the flexibility. They like the learning efficiency. They love the ability to start, stop, and review. And they like the search. And people say, well, how do you know they're watching the videos? Well, I go online, you know, Canvas has a tracking system to see people are watching it. And, you know, by and large, people are watching the entire video. So when I track it, people are watching it. They're just, for their own personal learning style, they have preferred this asynchronous style. Questions?
Do you use the same Canvas page for both the in-person and online students?
Absolutely. Yep. Everything is the same. The only thing that might change, the question is, do I use the same Canvas? I use the same Canvas. The one thing that does change, and I usually will tell people this, is sometimes the due dates will vary based on what group you're in. This is a time zone issue. So sometimes I'll have things that I'll say, this group, this is your due date, and the asynchronous distance learning group, this is your due date. I do that sometimes, particularly if there are some time zone issues involved. But other than that, everything else, everybody gets really the exact same look and feel. And even if you go to class, you can then 24 hours later, if you want to, you can go back, open up the recording, search to some section of the recording that maybe you tuned out for a while or you didn't quite fully grasp, and students will go back and watch it. And I find a lot of on-campus students will go back and rewatch aspects of lectures. Other questions for me?
This goes back a little ways, but I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you require note-taking. Like what does the assignment look like? You said some, but not all, or something like that. It was a limit on how much you required. I was just wondering if you could elaborate.
Sure. So what I do is built into my lectures, I will have blank slides or blank areas on slides where I will write that in. I will answer that in class. I will not send people my annotated slides. It's up to them to get this information. And then I will certainly ask test questions that's based on the stuff that I filled in the blank. And I do this with exercise, and sooner or later, or after a while, people start to realize that whether I'm, taking notes separately or I'm, using the digital thing and I'm making bookmarks, people kind of figure out that they need to do some note taking or they're going to miss things for exams. So I didn't mean to sound any more elaborate than that, but that's just what I mean by that.
Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, I'm basically done. There is a website listed there. I'll have my PowerPoint if you want slides from today available. Most of the stuff that I've done over the years, I've incorporated into the Nexus faculty resources page. Nexus also has, some quality standards, guidelines, tips for remote exams. So things that I've learned over the years, I share most of that through the Nexus faculty resources page. As well as other people that work at Nexus also sharing their recommendations. There's also an email group there. If you want anything from Nexus, please feel free to reach out to us. And I did want to leave it open for the last 10 minutes to, anything you would like to ask me or whatever. Again, there's lots of ways to do this. But I've been doing it for a long time. And so, I've tried a lot of things. I'm happy to share things that I felt like went well or didn't go well. Whenever I say that, though, I always like to put the caveat that this isn't the only way. There's other ways people have been successful as well. These are just some of the things that I've found over the years. So I would like to open it up for questions. Feel free to ask any general topic related to hybrid courses or online. Or you can ask me in a chat if you would like. Please make it to everybody. Okay. Since there are no more comments from the audience, just hopefully this was useful for you. That hopefully I was able to give you some things to think about. Again, I can make this slides available. I encourage you to kind of find what works best for you. But hopefully some of the things that we've talked about today have been giving you some ideas to move forward. So with that, I will say goodbye to everybody and have a great day.